We're gonna go over every strength number that football coaches need to write the best program possible, and we're gonna start right now. One of the biggest aspects around coaching at 2 different Olympics and coaching at multiple world championships, getting football players from 6th grade, 7th grade, all the way up to the Division I level, getting football players like Tommy Hudson, Jan Johnson into the actual NFL. The whole factor around this is basing your training system around specific numbers and around these benchmarks. And so we're gonna go into all of the specific numbers that you need to know so that you can take your athletes to that next level. And the first thing that we have to do is just identify the exercises that we want to look at. Okay, so if we're looking at a football player, we need to know what's their best 40 time. What's their best vertical jump? What's their best shuttle run? Their best bench press even. And then their clean, their single leg squat, and their broad jump. Okay, so what we're doing is we're looking at these exercises and we're thinking through the lens of the sport. Okay, so in the sport of football, there's going to be contact. You have opposition. You have an opponent that weighs 200, 230 pounds. You are both colliding with each other. So you have to have the ability to apply a massive amount of force into the ground so that you can run fast. And then on top of that, you have to tap into a pool of a lot of high threshold motor units so you can then overcome this opponent and then dominate them so that you can ideally go down the field and score a touchdown. That's literally the basis of the sport. Okay, so if we can look at all of those different aspects, that's where we figure out those specific lifts and those specific exercises. The 40 is going to show us how fast you're going to run. The broad jump, the vertical jump, that's going to show us how quickly you can move, okay, how quickly you can change direction. The single leg squat, the back squat, the clean, that's going to show us how well you can apply a large amount of force, a large amount of load into an object at a high speed. Something like the bench press, that's going to show us good upper body strength so now that you can move your opponent with your hands while applying a lot of force into the ground through your feet. So if we're looking at high school players, okay, we're going to look at really high level high school players. Let's say they can go play D3 at a high level or D2 football, possibly D1. In the 40-yard dash, we should have offensive linemen that could run about a 5.2 40. They should have defensive linemen that can run a sub 5 second 40. They're going to be very quick if they can run a sub 5 second 40. With linebackers, we're going to be looking at a 4.75 40. Okay, if we have high school linebackers that are running 4.75s, they're probably able to go play Division II football, if not higher, based on their skill, based off their size. If we're looking at wide receivers and even running backs, if we can get wide receivers and running backs to run around a 4.55 to a 4.6 40, now they're going to get open a lot easier. They're going to make better cuts. They're going to be faster on the field than most opponents. If we can look at those skilled positions, the best skilled position players will be faster. If you have a player on your team that is faster than every other player on the other team, it will be easier for them to get into space and to make big plays. So if they can run a 4.5 or a 4.55 to a 4.6, that's going to be ideal for those skilled position players. And then finally, D-backs are at a disadvantage. Okay, D-backs have to make reads, they have to make plays. Their 40 should be around a 4.5 if we want them to cover those faster opponents. Now, let's get into the shuttle run. Okay, so the next step is we go through the 40, then we go into the shuttle run. This is going to show us the direct ability of the athlete and their ability to change direction. Okay, so if we have an offensive lineman, right, and we're looking at this offensive lineman, if they can run a 4.8 shuttle, they're going to be pretty athletic. They're going to be pretty fast. And again, we're just talking about these high school players and if they can go play at the collegiate level. A D lineman running a 4.65 to a 4.7 shuttle is going to get us in position for them to make really quick cuts, for them to then run stunts at a very effective pace. Then for linebackers, we're going to be looking at like a 4.5 shuttle. I think that's a really good starting point. We've had 8th graders here that are probably going to be Power 5 football players. They've run 4.5 shuttles, and this is on a laser time. So if we can get most linebackers to run that, they're going to have the ability to scrape more effectively. And sometimes you will see these guys will start running 4.4, low 4.4s, high 4.3s. If we're looking at wide receivers, running backs, running in the 4.25s and the shuttle is going to be ideal. One of the big aspects that we had around coaching Nick Singleton was when he went to the Nike Combines, he ran like a 4.09 laser time. He went on to be a starting true freshman running back at Penn State. That's the type of stuff that we're looking at. Now, that's extraordinarily fast. Most high school kids will not run that. But if you can run a 4.2, that's going to put you into a really good position. And then finally, D-backs running around a 4.2 or a little bit faster is going to be great for them to identify and to make big time plays. Now, the big factor here is that we're giving you all these numbers. We started with the 40, we started with the shuttle, then we're going to work through the bench press and these other exercises. This is how we've built our entire training system inside of Peak Strength. Peak Strength is our strength training app and our speed-based app to help athletes get to the next level. We've taken all of these numbers, we've developed our entire system of training around achieving these numbers so that we can bridge the gap between the field and the weight room. So if you want to improve your overall programming and achieve these numbers, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store, and that's going to help you get on the right path to becoming an elite football player. Now, for the bench press, this is one of those areas that we need to look at, especially if we're looking at offensive linemen, defensive linemen, and ironically, even D-backs, because we need to be posting up on our opponents. I like to look at an offensive lineman and a defensive lineman and think through, if they can bench 350 to 375, those are big numbers for a high school football player. If they can get to that point, they're putting a lot of time in the weight room. They're putting a lot of time into their sport, into cultivating their power, right? So if we have O linemen, D linemen benching 350 to 375, they're going to be freaking good. Okay, they're going to be very, very good. Now, linebackers, that's going to be 315 to 330. That's where we're going to see some really, really good growth from those linebackers. For wide receivers, they're longer, they're taller. 250 to 275 is going to be more realistic for them. If they go a little bit higher, that's fine. Running backs, 300 plus. Now, Nicholas could bench 405 when he was in high school, but if we have most kids in high school benching over 300, that's going to be great for running backs, okay? That's going to be great for them throwing that crazy stiff arm. And then talking about D-backs, they've got to be benching around 275. They got to be posting up on their opponents, knocking them off balance so that they're not running the best routes. That's where that big time bench press comes into play. Now, looking at the clean, okay, I like to think through and I go, okay, the clean is going to be pretty similar to the bench press number-wise. And the big aspect around the clean is that it's going to help them make faster contact. Okay, if I can get my hat on the opponent's hat a lot quicker than they can, I have greater impulse and I'm going to dominate on the actual line. So for O linemen, D linemen, they're bigger individuals. They should be cleaning around 330 to 350. That's a huge clean. But a lot of our linemen need to be trained better. They need to be getting more reps in the clean. They need to be getting more reps in a back squat. Okay, so we're looking at that and we're saying, okay, let's get them to clean 330 to 350. That's some big time weight. But if we know that our linemen on average can clean more than our opponent's line, we're going to dominate the trenches. And that's when we're going to win these big games. Then we're looking at, okay, linebackers, 330 clean. Wide receivers, 275. Linebackers that can clean heavy. Okay, I'm thinking about Brandon George right now. He's a starting linebacker at Pitt. We knew that if he could clean 315 to 340 going into college, that he would set himself up for a really, really good, strong career. Same thing with looking at a running back again, like Nick Singleton, who could clean 365 when he was in high school. I think that's a really, really high number. Most running backs should be able to clean around 300 pounds when they're in high school. And then we're looking at wide receivers, D-backs, 250 to 275. But again, that's going to help them make better contact at high speeds, and they're going to be able to change direction and jump a little bit higher. Now, let's get into the next thing around high speed movement, and this is going to bring us into the broad jump. Okay, so if we're looking at a movement like the broad jump / vertical jump, these are going to be very, very high speed. In this case, broad jumps are going to help us identify how well someone is projecting themselves horizontally. Okay, so we're looking at offensive linemen. They're going to be heavier. They should be jumping 7.5 to 8 feet. D linemen, 8 to 8.5 feet on the broad jump. Ideally, it'd be a little bit higher. Once we see their front squats go up, their back squats go up, we will see that broad jump increase as well, and they're clean. Then we're looking at linebackers. Typically, they're faster, they're more explosive, they're not as heavy. That's going to be closer to 9 feet, even a little bit higher. Those are some really important numbers that we need to continuously develop. Then we're looking at wide receivers, running backs, D-backs. 9 feet and a quarter, somewhere around that, so like 9 feet 3 to 9 feet 6. That's where we're going to see these guys get super, super springy, And that's where we'll see if we can get really good at broad jumps, we're gonna get really good at diving for plays, making crazy catches, making crazy tackles. And then finally, let's get into some more locomotion-based exercises. So we're looking at like a single leg squat. A single leg squat is gonna help us see and identify unilateral weaknesses in our players. And if we have them on a single leg roller where it's more stable and we can see how well they execute this, now we can make some big time comparisons and say, okay, our O linemen should be able to single leg squat 330 for 3 on each leg. Okay, they're heavier, they need more mobility in their hips, and if they can handle that in a single leg position, they're going to be more stable on the field. If they're more stable on the field, they can control their opponents. Now for D linemen, 330 to 350. Typically, D linemen are just a little bit more athletic than offensive linemen. They're not as big. They should be able to squat a little bit more. Linebackers, again, these are the fast guys. These are super athletic individuals. They're probably the most athletic out on the field outside of maybe safeties and D-backs. We're looking at around 315 for 3 on each leg. They can single leg 315 for 3 on each leg. That's going to be ideal. Wide receivers, we might look at that and say 275. They're taller, they're longer. Same thing with those D-backs. It's going to be a little bit more challenging for them because they're not as heavy. Those numbers at 275 for 3 on each leg are very feasible if you want to develop into a very solid high school football player. And then finally, one of the big factors around Nicholas's success in high school is that he could single leg squat 405 for reps. Okay, that is an absurdly high number. So let's bring that down. Most running backs will be around 300 to 315 if they want to run for 1,000 yards. Yes, there's going to be outliers, 100%. But if we can look through that and say, okay, let's get that number to 315. Now that running back is going to be faster, more stable, be able to cut quicker and run over their opponents. So all of these numbers are baseline numbers. They're benchmark numbers that we can use to get our athletes towards. When we can work towards those numbers, now we know we're going to have more freak athletes than our opponents. There will be outliers that are stronger and not as good. There's going to be outliers that are weaker and not as good. These are baseline numbers that we can provide as goals to train our athletes towards. And again, these are numbers that we use inside of our strength training app, Peak Strength. You can head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. You can download Peak Strength, go in and select football-based training, because remember, freaks, if you want to become a champion, you've always got to cultivate your power. Peace.